هلا هن كانوا عم يطلبوا بشكل عام طلبوا 10 ملايين.
The United States government will not pay ransoms.
The hostage business, a growing trade that fuels conflict around the world.
They started going up 5 million, 10 million, 15 million.
They were asking for the release of all Muslim prisoners or 100 million euro.
Secret documents obtained by Al Jazeera's investigative unit exposed the government's doing deals with hostage takers.
Debbie and Bruno, welcome home.
We were told never to disclose that they actually paid.
كل 100,000 في بكيس لحالة.
The families revealed secret negotiations with kidnappers who threatened to execute their relatives.
You don't play with the life of your loved one. You have 3 days, girl.
The kind of money you are asking is impossible.
I'm finished. I'm dead. They will kill me.
Governments face a moral dilemma.
It's always a priority to recover American citizens, but it's not always the highest priority.
In the case of terrorist kidnap, no ransom should be paid.
It was a travesty. It was a mess. Our government knows they failed us.
It's a murky business worth hundreds of millions of dollars, involving spies, lies, and cover-ups.
Governments lie all the time. The thing is, you don't want to get caught in the lie.
In 2012, Syria became the epicenter of a global hostage crisis.
Des hommes sont sortis du pick-up en face avec des kalachnikovs en tirant en l'air. On a été extraits du véhicule, ils nous ont retourné les vêtements sur le visage. On s'est senti soulevé de terre, on a été jeté dans la benne à l'arrière du pick-up. Et puis le pick-up est parti en roulant. Je me suis dit, pour moi c'est perdu, c'est terminé, la vie s'arrête ici.
Pierre Pissinin de Plata is a Belgian journalist. In 2013, he was kidnapped in Syria along with an Italian reporter, Domenico Querico.
Ci hanno portato in una casa lì vicino, dove siamo stati completamente spogliati, picchiati, interrogati. Le condizioni sono sempre state terribili. Siamo stati trattati come animali, come bestie, come cani.
Our investigation into the kidnapping of Pierre and Domenico exposes the behind-the-scenes deals and the public deceit of the hostage business. The pair were grabbed at gunpoint by criminals and then sold to the highest bidder.
Ha fatto un cambio di denaro con una persona che era ferma con un altro pick-up, anzi con una Land Rover. Grande pacco di mazze di dollari americani, non di moneta siriana, dollari americani da 100 dollari. La condizione del sequestrato è quella di un sacco di riso o di farina, un prodotto da vendere, e quindi non ti possono malmenare perché se no nessuno ti compra più.
The pair were bought by fighters linked to the Al-Farouq Brigade, one of the many rebel groups at war with the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad. Domenico had considered the rebels his friends and protectors while he reported on the Syrian civil war.
La cosa più terribile in tutta questa storia è che io ho avvertito il senso del tradimento. Io ero stato in Siria 5 volte, tra il 2011 e il 2013, sempre con i ribelli. Gli uomini a cui mi ero affidato per andare a raccontare la storia dei siriani mi hanno tradito e mi hanno catturato per denaro.
Just a few hundred meters from the Syrian border is the Turkish headquarters of the Farouq Brigade. Its leaders claim that the men who bought Pierre and Domenico were renegade members of the group, lured away by the prospect of a ransom.
كانوا يتعاملون مع الصحفيين على أنهما أجانب ممكن أن يتم مقايضتهم بالمال. فبغض النظر سواء كانوا صحفيين أو عملاء، فإن الهدف من الاحتفاظ بهم هو الحصول على مال.
Et alors, la première nuit, ça a été l'horreur. Ils ont tout fermé, on n'avait presque pas d'air, donc on suffoquait. Et dans la nuit totale, à un moment, nous avons entendu un bruit. Et je me suis dit, oh non. J'ai pris un briquet que j'avais sur moi pour éclairer, que j'avais réussi à cacher. Partout, des fissures des murs sortaient des cafards qui couraient dans tous les sens, qui tombaient sur nous, avec des grappes accrochées au plafond.
The Belgian and Italian governments publicly state that they do not pay ransoms. The future for Pierre and Domenico looked bleak.
E ho cominciato a pensare che in realtà quella prigionia, cioè stare chiusi in una stanza, sarebbe diventata la mia nuova vita, che la vita che avevo avuto prima era ormai perduta.
Je pensais que je ne m'en sortirais plus, qu'on ne me laisserait plus jamais repartir et que j'allais disparaître dans une prison, dans des conditions probablement assez terribles.
The fate of the two men would hinge on a secret government deal, a deal that exposes the covert workings of the hostage business. Our investigation would start 5,000 miles from Syria.
A joyous reunion. His mum surprised him all the way from Italy.
The triumphant homecoming of Debbie Kalitz and Bruno Pellizzari, freed after nearly 2 years in the hands of Somali pirates.
Debbie and Bruno, welcome home.
Thank you all. Thank you, South Africa, and we love you.
The world was told that Debbie and Bruno were freed after a daring combination of diplomacy and Somali military might. The story was a lie. Debbie from South Africa and Bruno, a dual South African and Italian citizen, were sailing the African coast when their boat was boarded by Somali pirates.
They came with 3 skiffs. The leader had a bazooka, he had a turban wrapped around his head, and the other 3 had AK-47s pointed at us.
And what was going through your mind?
We thought it was just a robbery, then they would leave. But it wasn't like that.
Blindfolded, just like you see it in the movies.
All they wanted was money.
$100,000 at that stage. Then they started going up $5 million, $10 million, $15 million, and it's...
At her Durban home, Bruno's sister Vera Hecht was desperately trying to negotiate with the kidnappers.
What did he say to you in the very first call?
He said that we have your brother, and if you are interested in saving his life, you must call us back. He answered, and all he said was, we want money, 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 money. What they had started with was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
What was the opening?
The opening was $10 million.
So began nearly 20 months of dialogue with the pirates, and their ever-changing demands and constant threats.
Hello?
Hello, Bruno. Bruno.
Hello. Yes, it's me.
Hi. Hi.
Okay, I haven't got long to speak, okay? It has to be business only, okay?
Okay.
If they don't get what they want, they're going to kill us.
I know, but if they kill you, they don't get anything, Bruno. They won't kill you.
Hello.
They will get nothing.
Did you ever say to the South Africans, can you pay?
Well, they told us we don't pay. They told us point blank that they don't pay ransoms. and they don't get involved in negotiations.
The family turned to a local charity with links in Somalia to try and seek a solution.
South Africa has made its policy very clear. We don't talk to terrorists, we don't negotiate. Where does that leave you? That means you leave the family to do the negotiation all alone. It's a slow death for the family and for the hostage.
These are my children. I love them very much.
They love
and
you.
I miss them no matter what.
They love you too. And we're trying our best. We're doing our best, Debbie. You know that.
Are there any moments when you thought that you were going to die?
Pretty much. It's there consistently, day or night.
Oh my God, you haven't got the money. Tell me you haven't got the money. Don't say you're going to get it and you haven't, and there's no way to get it.
I know. I've been telling them what I have and they're not accepting what I have.
I mean, I've never heard of anybody being released from the pirates or from Al-Shabaab without paying money. Kidnapping is a business inside Somalia. Hostage is a commodity. I'm sorry to put it that way, but hostage is a commodity.
Vera was working hard to raise public awareness of Debbie and Bruno's plight. But most of all, she needed to raise money.
It was way more than we could ever dream of collecting. But we had to try and show that we were trying to do something. We just saw the few rands trickle in, and it was so dismal.
We've got about $9,500 plus the other three. So I've got about $12,000.
$12,000?
Yes.
The worst one was when they said your government is not cooperating.
Government refuses.
One of you is going to die.
You have 1 minute to decide which one.
And then in the background you can see a room and you can see like a can of petrol in the room. They're going to burn one of us.
I'm trying to do my best to help you guys. You need to get off your backside.
The kind of money you are asking is impossible.
No, and they'll be black, they'll be killed. If you guys, if you don't do something about it, you don't live with the life of your loved one. If you have 3 days, girl, you understand?
Vera was exhausted and out of options. Then, 18 months after her brother and his girlfriend were kidnapped, she received a message from an Italian calling himself Marco, saying he was going to help.
Were you contacted by a gentleman called Marco to begin discussions with him? Was that how it worked?
Through Facebook.
What did he say and what did he ask you to do initially?
To make a deal. To make a deal. It's been too long. And, yeah, oh, and I must get proof of life once more.
Secret intelligence files obtained by Al Jazeera reveal for the first time that Bruno Pellizzari's Italian citizenship saved the couple's lives. The Italian authorities, frustrated by the lack of progress made by the South African government, decided to intervene and pay a ransom.
The documents that I've seen tell me that it's purely from the Italians, and the Italians took the money in. Does that sound about right from what you understand?
What documents do you have?
We've seen documents that break down the role that the Italians played in that, and it says in there that they were prepared to pay up to around $925,000 US. Does that sound correct? When I say these figures to you, Vera, you're nodding and smiling. Does that mean that they're correct?
They sound correct, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know this is quite difficult for you to speak about. Did the Italians ask you not to talk about the detail of what was going on?
Yeah. Yeah, we were told never to disclose that they actually paid.
Now, Vera was in almost daily contact with Marco, the Italian intelligence officer.
We'd communicate through Gmail, but without actually sending any mail. We had the same account, and we'd log on and check our communication we left on an email, an unsent email.
With the Italian government involved, events moved quickly. They opened new communication routes to the kidnappers. Proof of life questions obtained by Al Jazeera reveal that negotiations were coming to a swift conclusion.
3 months before the release, when they first contacted me.
So it was very quick after they got involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they told me to make a deal, and I made the deal, and I kept it as low as possible.
In June 2012, Vera, accompanied by Italian intelligence officers, welcomed home and now free Debbie and Bruno. The kidnappers had accepted over $500,000 from the Italian government.
If the Italians hadn't got involved, what do you think would have happened?
Somalis would have ended up burying my brother and Debbie. I do believe they would have died there.
After secretly arranging Debbie and Bruno's release, the Italians needed a cover story. The intelligence documents reveal that the couple's release was to be portrayed to the media as a successful operation by the Western-backed Somali security forces.
I mean, is any country going to say openly that we paid the money? What does it make you look like in the club of 204 nations? Oh, you are the bad one. You see, you're setting the precedent now. And now, if they capture somebody else, we'll have to pay it because you paid.
It was a secret that Debbie and Bruno were also expected to keep.
When the press conferences happened afterwards and people were asking you about ransoms and stuff, I mean, how difficult was it to not say, oh, the Italians did it, thank you very much? I mean, that must have been very hard.
I found it difficult, okay? I don't know about you, but I found it difficult. You know, we were debriefed on certain things that we were not allowed to speak about, and that was one of the things we weren't supposed to even speak about.
For Vera, the Italian agent Marco saved her brother's life.
If Marco's watching this now, what would you say to him if you were to see him again?
Just thank you very much. Grazie molto, grazie mille. And you're still my hero.
Turkey's porous border with Syria has long been exploited by smugglers. The Italian government now hoped to use the same routes to move millions of dollars in ransom payments. By the summer of 2013, Pierre Piscinin de Plata and Domenico Querico had been held for several months. The kidnappers were losing patience.
Uno dei combattenti di questo gruppo è entrato nella stanza in cui ero chiuso, ha tirato fuori la pistola, il revolver, mi ha fatto vedere che metteva le pallottole dentro la canna, che la pistola non era scarica, e poi mi ha detto di appoggiare la testa contro il muro, contro la parete, e ha messo il colpo in canna e mi ha appoggiato la pistola alla tempia, ridendo. Rideva di vedere in un altro essere umano la paura di morire. L'ha fatto 2 volte. L'ha fatto 2 volte. E senti l'odore del suo piacere.
Ils m'ont lié les mains, on m'a mis un bloc de pierre sur le dos. Un d'entre eux est monté sur le bloc de pierre, a commencé à sauter. Je pensais qu'il allait me briser la colonne vertébrale et que j'allais rester peut-être handicapé.
The Italian government needed to move quickly. First, they needed someone who had contact with the kidnappers. They needed a man who could work in the shadows. They needed a middleman.
اتصل في هذا صديقي السوري، هو معنا شغال بالثورة بشكل كويس. اتصل في صديقي السوري، فأنا قال لي بدي اجي أنا وشخصين قابلك.
Muatta Shaklab, a former Syrian politician, has worked as a middleman on numerous hostage negotiations. The Italians invited him to their embassy in Lebanon.
واحد عمول أنا محامي العائلي، وواحد عمول أنا وزارة الخارجية، ولكن أنا عرفت إنه هذا الرجل اللي عم يدعي إنه هو محامي العائلي، إنه هو بجهاز المخابرات الإيطالية لما نزلنا على بيروت.
While the Italians were working behind the scenes to free Domenico, the situation for Belgian national Pierre was very different.
Il a été très clair dès le départ que le gouvernement belge ne s'impliquerait absolument pas dans des négociations avec les terroristes. L'idée, c'était, comme en Grande-Bretagne ou aux États-Unis, de n'avoir absolument aucun contact, de refuser de payer une rançon.
Luckily for Pierre and Domenico, the Italian government appeared to have fewer concerns about negotiating.
معتز خبرني بأنه البلجيكيين رفضوا يدفعوا ولا ليرة، بس الإيطاليين رح يدفعوا مشان يطالعوا بيير ودومينيكو البلجيكي.
4 months after taking possession of Domenico and Pierre, the kidnappers were willing to negotiate. But first, the Italians needed proof that the two journalists were still alive. Even this came at a price.
حتى الإجابة على الأسئلة ستكون مقابل مال من أجل إظهار حسن النية عند الوسطاء.
Ho dovuto rispondere a domande come si chiamava il fidanzato di mia figlia. Per fortuna avevo un fidanzato perché altrimenti non avrei saputo come rispondere. E come si chiamava il nostro cane.
How much money did he want for the questions?
طلب $300,000.
The Belgian government's refusal to deal with kidnappers meant it couldn't even assist with Pierre's proof of life questions.
Parfois, j'ai l'impression que le gouvernement belge attendait que je sois exécuté. On m'aurait donné une belle médaille à titre posthume.
Coming up, the European government's paying ransoms in Syria. And did the American government allow a third party to pay for their citizens' release?
He came to us and he said, the Jabhat al-Nusra wants to negotiate about Theo Curtis's release.
I myself am uncomfortable with the outsourcing of negotiations for the release of our hostages.
For almost 5 months, Domenico Querico and Pierre Piscinin de Prata had been held in Syria. The intervention of the Italian government meant their freedom was now in sight.
وبعد مفاوضات شاقة استمرت أكثر من شهر قدروا الشباب يتوصلوا لاتفاق.
Unaware of the deal, the hostages were often given false hope by their captors.
C'è una cosa che li divertiva molto. Dirci che quello era il nostro ultimo giorno di prigionia, che il giorno dopo ci avrebbero accompagnato a una frontiera e saremmo stati liberi. E aggiungevano sempre questa parolina, che è Inshallah.
Then, on September the 8th, 2013, the two journalists were bundled into the back of a car.
Et puis à un certain moment, il y a eu un coup de fil. On nous a fait monter dans une voiture et on a foncé sur la frontière. Et là, on s'est dit, maintenant, c'est peut-être le moment.
عند وصولنا للمعبر وعدم السماح لهم بالنزول من السيارة فترة نصف ساعة عادت حالة التوتر للصحفيين الاثنين.
On n'était pas encore sûr parce que quelques semaines auparavant, on nous avait aussi emmenés à la frontière et puis on avait fait demi-tour. Ça a été très dur.
Finally, after several frantic phone calls between the middlemen and the kidnappers, the money was handed over.
أنا لما تسلمت مصاري أنا كنت موجود، أنا والشخص الإيطالي اللي هو جايب المصاري.
كان المبلغ عبارة عن كل 100,000 دولار موجودة بكيس نايلون بشكل منفصل.
الخاطفين كانوا طالبين 10 ملايين، أظن المبلغ كان 4 مليون دولار.
عندما انتهى الأمر وتم الاتصال وتم الإفراج عنهم، نزلوا من السيارة وهم داخل الأراضي السورية، أحدهم نزلت دموعه.
E nel passaggio della terra di nessuno, eravamo assolutamente convinti che ci avrebbero sparato nella schiena.
Personnellement, je n'avais pas vraiment d'émotion. Je n'étais pas encore très sûr qu'on était vraiment libre. Je savais qu'on allait vers les Occidentaux en face, mais je ne ressentais rien.
As Domenico and Pierre arrived at Rome airport, there were rumours that a ransom had been paid, an accusation the Italian government denied. They had already prepared a cover story for the journalist's release.
المخابرات الإيطالية وقفت هنا، قالت نحن ما بنقدر ندفع مصاري، وما دفعوا، ما تعاملوا بالمصاري بنوب. أسرت المخطوف الإيطالي والبلجيكي، جمعوا مصاري وبعتوهم مع.
Despite the Italians' claims, Pierre says his family did not pay a ransom. Domenico claims that he is unaware of any family payment.
Non è che non voglio dirlo, non so nulla. Che come si sia svolta, con chi e in che termini sia poi stata, come dire, raggiunto un accordo sulla nostra liberazione, sulla mia liberazione, non ne so assolutamente nulla.
The Italian government declined to take part in this program. It stated the policy of the Italian government is not to pay ransoms.
ما فيني كذب عيوني، أنا شفت المصاري، بس يمكن الحكومة الإيطالية عم تقول هيك لأنه يعني جزء من مبدأ عزة النفس أو الكبرى، ما بعرف.
We are Greta Ramelli and Vanessa Marzullo. We are in big danger and we could be killed.
In January 2015, aid workers Vanessa Marzullo and Greta Ramelli were released by Jabhat al-Nusra, a group once linked to Al-Qaeda. The Italian government again denied that money had been paid for their release. But Al Jazeera has obtained evidence that suggests the Italian government is again not telling the truth. These are exclusive pictures of the $11 million given to al-Nusra to secure the girls' release.
Italy is just one of several European countries, including France and Spain, that are believed to have paid money to kidnappers. It's a policy of deal and denial that works in securing the release of their citizens, but it's at odds with the policies of the United States, the United Kingdom, and other prominent Western nations.
The United States government will not pay ransoms to terrorist groups holding American hostages.
In the case of terrorist kidnap, no ransom should be paid. Britain continues with this policy, America continues with this policy, but we need to redouble the efforts to make sure that other countries are good to their word.
If it's your only goal to recover those hostages, then the governments themselves ought to just pay and have the moral courage to do so openly. But they recognize that that's not a good idea, and so they maintain this public fiction that they are opposed to the payments.
Mark Mitchell was President Obama's hostage policy advisor until early 2015. He sat on the National Security Council and was at the center of the White House's response to the hostage crisis.
The situation with the hostages in January 2014 was a microcosm of our overall awareness of the Islamic State. While we were clearly aware that they had taken hostages and were holding them, we didn't have the intelligence necessary, and our resources were frankly prioritized elsewhere. It's always a priority to recover American citizens, but it's not always the highest priority.
The historic city of Antakya is just a few kilometers from the border crossing with Syria, where Domenico and Pierre were released. Many of the secret deals to free Western hostages are made here. American journalist Peter Theo Curtis was based in Antakya when in October 2012 he was kidnapped.
All of a sudden I didn't hear from him. And I didn't want to sound like a worried mother, but I was a worried mother. And then I got an email from him that with the subject heading of "Hey," and then there was no message. And then I really panicked.
A few weeks later, fellow American journalist Jim Foley was taken at gunpoint just a short distance away.
We wondered that Jim didn't call us on Thanksgiving. And sure enough, that next morning, we received a call that Jim had in fact been kidnapped. So that's when we knew.
The fate of these two men reveals the contradiction at the heart of the American hostage policy. The public declarations of no negotiation and no ransom do not tell the whole story, as the families were finding out.
I called the local office of the FBI, and the guy who answered the phone, I said, my son has disappeared in Syria. And he said, lady, that's a dangerous place. Why'd he go there? Didn't he know?
We got no advice really from the State Department. And except don't go to dangerous places, that kind of stuff.
The men who snatched Peter Theo Curtis sold him to Jabhat al-Nusra, at that time an affiliate of Al-Qaeda.
My life is in very, very, very grave danger. I have 3 days. They're giving me 3 days to live. 3 days. If you don't do anything, I'm finished. I'm dead. They will kill me.
When they did start asking for money, it was a different sum. Every time it went up, it went down. Maybe 5 million, 3 million, 20 million, sometimes dollars, sometimes euros.
Jim Foley found himself in the hands of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL, a movement known for its uncompromising brutality.
They were asking for the release of all Muslim prisoners or 100 million euro. The captors soon realized that we weren't the government. We were just a family telling them the truth, that we had no power to release prisoners, certainly didn't have 100 million euro. And they became disgusted and cut off communication.
From their homes in New England, the Curtis and Foley families were working hard to negotiate the release of their sons. But they weren't the only Americans doing so.
I'm paid by the U.S. government to assist in the release of their citizens that have been kidnapped around the world.
Our investigation has established that the US government was secretly attempting to talk with groups holding American hostages in Syria. A member of the team agreed to speak to us on condition that we conceal his identity.
Usually we have people working with us here in the US or in Syria, and one of them came to us and said, "Hey, I have some information about Theo and the kidnappers want to negotiate about him."
So someone approached you guys?
Yes, he came to us and he said, the Jabhat al-Nusra wants to negotiate about Theo Curtis to release him.
By now, the families had raised money to pay the kidnappers. But during meetings at the White House, Mark Mitchell warned that paying a ransom to a listed terrorist organization broke US law.
They put this guy from the National Security Council in, who was apparently our representative from the White House. Bad choice for the White House, because it was this military gentleman who had absolutely no compassion for us. All he knew was no concessions. This gentleman did threaten us three times, Simon. And so for the other families, that was horrible. We just were appalled.
I never threaten the families. I don't have the power. I don't make those prosecutorial decisions, but I think it's incumbent on me as a government official to clearly state what the law is and the potential ramifications of it. Not in a threatening manner, but the idea that it's somehow shocking that a government official would encourage people to abide by the law, I think I find shocking in itself.
Despite Mark Mitchell's warning, Nancy Curtis was undeterred.
And I didn't care. Fine, go ahead. Put me in jail. I won't have to, you know, won't have to keep my house running.
Behind the scenes, the families were also being helped by private individuals. David Bradley is the chairman of the publishing company Atlantic Media. He was so moved by the plight of the hostages that he set up a discreet task force to assist with the negotiations.
The very first thing that David said to me when I met him, which must have been in fall of 2013, he said, you know, we need to follow the money here. Who's funding Nusra? I think the Qataris are. And in 2014, he made 2 trips to Qatar to meet with the head of their security on Theo's behalf. And when that happened, things began to move.
In recent years, Qatar has emerged as a central hub for talks between Islamic groups and the West. By providing a platform for dialogue, it has become a key player in hostage negotiations.
We've been approached in several cases, and thankfully we've been successful in many of these cases, but there were also cases that because of the difficulty and the nature of the parties involved, we were not able to succeed.
I think the use of a country like Qatar that has its own ability to open up a dialogue with people is extraordinarily useful. You know, essentially, almost any of these jihadi kidnappings, the use of an intermediary is going to have to come into play.
That is a letter that I wrote to Secretary Kubaisi, who's the head of intelligence for the Qatari government. He worked very hard, and he sent messages to me that I shouldn't worry, that Theo was in better condition, that negotiations are underway, that I should be hopeful and feel positive. He was very supportive.
The intervention of the Qatari government was quickly relayed to the US team.
I remember one of the people that was working with us was told by his sources that the mediator didn't like how much the family had offered, and he said the Qatari would pay much more than that.
Nancy was fearful that US policy would prohibit any attempts by Qatar to intervene.
Do you think if the Qataris had paid for Theo, that the Americans would have objected?
I was afraid that they would. I was afraid that they would.
Why?
Because I know the American policy is no ransom, no, don't negotiate, no, 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 bad, go away.
The Foley family had been raising money for a possible ransom, but communication with Jim's holders had ceased. Then, on August 12th, they received a message.
We realized the government wasn't going to help us in that regard, so we had raised money. So we were excited to hear from them. We naively thought, oh my God, you know, this is our chance. Now we can tell them what we've raised. But it was stupid of us because they were just warning us they were going to kill Jim. And they did.
On the 19th of August 2014, Jim Foley became the first Westerner killed by ISIL, his beheading posted on the internet. Nancy Curtis had become close to the Foley family.
I was in the kitchen, and my cousin called me and said, Jim's been beheaded, and I just collapsed on the floor and sobbed. And it was, and you know, I realized I've been in denial for 2 years. And here's the reality.
The problem with ISIS is they're happy to get money, but that's not the driving force. They've made a decision that the value in executing this American hostage for the publicity, for the recruitment advantage it brings to them, these are worthy goals in and of themselves.
You can still
Just 6 days later, Peter Theo Curtis was freed.
I have learned bit by bit that there have been literally hundreds of people, brave, determined, and big-hearted people all over the world working for my release.
He became the only American hostage successfully released from Syria.
How many cases in total have you worked on?
Let's say a dozen.
And of those dozen cases, how many of them have been resolved successfully with the hostage coming home?
Only Theo Curtis.
That was the only successful one?
Yes.
Rumours of a financial deal soon reached the American team.
We knew the Qataris were involved. We knew they could pay money. We knew that they have their own ways, but we didn't know the exact details.
The United States government certainly did not ask the Qataris to pay a ransom. In fact, we asked the Qataris, consistent with our longstanding policy, to not pay a ransom for Mr. Curtis.
Was there something else that was promised to al-Nusra? Was there money that was paid
Certainly
by...
not by the United States.
Has Qatar ever paid a money, a ransom, a concession for the release of a hostage?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And most of the negotiation processes took a lot of time and effort because we sometimes don't negotiate face-to-face to the group involved, but in many cases we do it through mediators.
As part of a regional coalition that supports fighters trying to topple the Syrian regime, the Qatari government has access to Jabhat al-Nusra, the group that held Curtis.
Releasing him through some sort of political price, even if the price is just keeping the channels open, is far more valuable to the leadership of that group than any sum of money they might have gotten.
Can you give us some kind of understanding of how you would do that, move from $20 million to nothing for the release of somebody?
Well, it depends on how skilled the people who were involved in the negotiation process. They made it clear that they pressed a lot on the humanitarian nature of this case.
I don't have any first-hand knowledge of what the Qataris did. Frankly, I think they've been very opaque about the exact nature of the deal. But I do feel uncomfortable because I don't believe that an organization like al-Nusra would simply release Mr. Curtis or others on humanitarian grounds. It's just not what they do.
Have you heard much speculation of what was discussed, what was offered, what was negotiated?
No.
Have you ever asked?
No.
Do you care?
No. I'm deeply grateful to the Qataris and to David Bradley, because they were the people who made it happen. You know, there was probably other stuff going on behind the scenes that I don't know about, you know, and we'll never know.
Qatar's involvement in freeing Peter Theo Curtis led to accusations that the United States is simply using others to negotiate on its behalf.
I myself am uncomfortable with the outsourcing of negotiations for the release of our hostages to other countries. While our interests are highly similar and often coincident, they're not identical.
To say that this country's doing the U.S. government's dirty work, I think would be unfair to say. That's a smart diplomatic approach, I believe.
The fact that Qatar can keep a line open to leadership of a political group that has ambitions beyond making money is a real incentive. Now, whether some politicians in the United States will say that's bad and we don't want that to happen, then what they really ought to say is we'd prefer that this group kill Mr. Curtis.
In June 2015, President Obama issued a review of hostage policy. Although the government's position of no concessions remains, families of hostages will no longer be at risk of prosecution for paying a ransom.
I think the decision to allow ransoms to be paid does not contribute to the safety of American citizens. First of all, it abrogates the numerous international commitments the United States has made to prohibit their citizens from making payments. Now we have public statements from officials directly contravening that. And most importantly, I think it removes the last line of defense that the families have in their negotiations. They no longer can rely upon the fact that it's against the law, and now they are subject to being beggared by the hostage takers. There's no excuse. The hostage takers can just say, clear out your bank accounts, sell your home, we want it all, and they have no defense.
Over 30 Americans and hundreds of other nationalities continue to be held hostage around the world. The global response to the act of kidnapping remains secretive and selective.
In principle, should ransoms be paid for your release?
E credo che I governi che scelgono di salvare o di tentare di salvare le vite dei propri concittadini adempiono un compito etico, che è quello che distingue lo Stato civile dalla barbarie di coloro che compiono i sequestri.
When you hear Italian governments have paid millions of dollars for the release of their citizens, when asked to say, we didn't do it, what's your reaction to that kind of policy?
I think it's fine. We do that all the time. That's what governments lie all the time. The thing is, you don't want to get caught in the lie.
To engage in direct discussions with these terrorist organizations is to itself grant them a degree of legitimacy and only open yourself up to further abuse.
It was a travesty. It was a mess. Our government knows they failed us. And so I'm hopeful that Jim's life and the others will give birth to more dialogue between citizens and our government, between our allies, and hopefully with our enemies.
I mean, what do? You've been demanded money from terrorists, from demons, and you're in trouble if you do give them money. But it's your family. What do you do?